The film begins with a young man named Eric engaged in a heated dispute with his friend. Suddenly, Eric starts assaulting his buddy, while the rest of their friends stand frozen, too afraid to intervene. Eric has a reputation for engaging in brawls, which keeps them at bay. Later, the principal summons Eric due to his recurring misconduct, leading to his immediate expulsion from school. Upon returning home, Eric encounters further trouble as his stepfather intends to punish him for the school fight and subsequent expulsion. His birth mother is well aware of everything, but in reality, she doesn't care. She believes Eric needs to learn from his mistakes, so she allows the punishment to proceed. Later, his mother asked him to meet up with her friend Gunnar, who happened to be a lawyer. Gunnar handed Eric his business card, saying that if he ever found himself in any kind of trouble, he should give him a call. Eric, feeling a bit puzzled, just stared at the business card once Gunnar left. Eric's mom then expressed her disappointment regarding his expulsion from school. However, she dropped a bombshell. She had enrolled Eric in a new school, an all-boys boarding school called Starburg. She genuinely hoped that Eric wouldn't squander this opportunity and told him firmly that it was his last chance. Eric understood and promised his mom that he'd excel in school, graduate, and not let her down. Eric arrived at his new school, this time dressed in a uniform and sporting a fresh, short haircut. His roommate turned out to be Pierre, known as the school's brainiac. They had a conversation and immediately hit it off because Pierre was a friendly and amiable guy. When evening descended, Eric and Pierre made their way to the dining hall. It was there that Eric crossed paths with Johan, another student. Johan spilled the beans about how each school had its unique traditions, and in this one, students were treated based on their social status. Right after Johan mentioned this, a student sitting next to Eric was summoned by two others at the far end of the table, Otto and Gustav. The unfortunate student came from an ordinary family, while Otto and Gustav hailed from noble backgrounds. These high-class nobles took great pleasure in picking on students from less privileged backgrounds, like the guy sitting next to Eric. They acted as if they were above everyone else because their families held significant influence within the school. Furthermore, they were part of an exclusive school club that granted them the authority to discipline other students. Following dinner, Pierre inquired whether Eric would be up for a discreet smoke. Initially, Eric declined because he had made a promise to his mother not to engage in rule-breaking. Johan, chiming in, cautioned that they could face serious consequences if caught smoking. Nevertheless, Pierre's confidence in their ability to avoid detection ultimately swayed Eric. The next morning during breakfast, Otto and Gustav summoned Eric. They claimed it was a customary welcome for transfer students and wished to acquaint him with the school's practices. Eric, however, flatly declined, leading to severe consequences. Otto inflicted significant harm on Johan to the extent that he required medical assistance. In the evening, Otto and Gustav were getting ready for another prank on Eric. They summoned him to their usual hangout spot and instructed him to tidy up a considerable mess of soiled shoes piled on the floor. Once again, Eric declined to obey their commands and left in frustration. An irritated Gustav turned to Otto, inquiring about what to do regarding Eric. However, Otto didn't seem overly concerned. He appeared quite relaxed and suggested giving Eric some leeway since he was new. Eric confided in Pierre about the situation, and Pierre's expression turned serious upon hearing it. He cautioned Eric against defying Otto and Gustav any further, as those who did usually faced consequences. Despite his earlier reputation as a tough guy, Eric insisted that he wasn't afraid of them and wouldn't follow their orders. Later in the evening, Eric and Pierre brainstormed strategies to handle Otto and Gustav's bullying without resorting to violence. However, it proved challenging since most students preferred complying with Otto and Gustav's demands rather than facing potential injuries. The next day, Gustav accidentally collided with Eric in a school corridor. Gustav insisted that Eric apologize, but Eric refused, believing that it was Gustav who had bumped into him by mistake. This refusal angered Gustav, and he challenged Eric to a fight that was set for later that night at a specific location. Eric received the invitation to the fight from Pierre and Johan, who explained that Otto and Gustav never played fair. They would gather their friends and gang up on Eric during the confrontation. That night, Eric had initially intended to accept Gustav's challenge and engage in a brawl. However, he recalled his mother's advice about behaving well to graduate from school, so he decided against it. Upon returning to his room, Pierre offered Eric a cigarette to help him relax. At the fight location, Otto and Gustav had been waiting for Eric for a significant amount of time. When Eric failed to show up, Otto assumed Eric was too scared and started taunting him, with his friends cheering him on. The following day, Otto proceeded to call out the names of students who consistently found themselves in trouble and didn't obey the school's student organization. Eric's name was among those called. During a school hearing, Otto, who was also the student council president, decided to discipline Eric with a full month of confinement. Additionally, Eric was assigned the task of digging a 1-meter-deep trench around the school premises. Eric worked on these trenches late into the evening, causing him to have his meals alone in the dining hall. Following dinner, while Eric was having his solitary meal, a canteen worker named Maro approached him. She appeared to be quite intrigued by Eric and mentioned that he reminded her of her brother. Maro commented that Eric's attitude reminded her of her siblings, who didn't appreciate being bossed around. After dinner, Eric proceeded with his usual quick smoke, doing so alone. Unexpectedly, Maro showed up and expressed concern about the health implications of smoking. She even discussed the scent of his breath. Then, out of the blue, she kissed him and gave him a tight hug. Both Eric and Maro were aware of the school's strict regulations prohibiting romantic relationships between students and staff. The penalties were severe, potentially resulting in expulsion for Eric and job loss for Maro. Nonetheless, that particular night, Eric and Maro seemed unconcerned about these rules. During Christmas break, Eric returned home, receiving a warm welcome from his mother. However, his stepfather was less pleased and promptly inquired about why Eric had accumulated so many punishments, even leading to suspension. Eric didn't hold back and told the truth. He explained that he had defied a fellow student who happened to be a noble and influential figure at school. His stepfather chimed in, emphasizing the importance of showing respect and compliance toward noble students. Given Eric's poor report cards and numerous school troubles, his stepdad decided to discipline him with another caning. Eric's understanding mother, knowing her son's struggles, chose not to intervene. After the Christmas break, Eric returned to school, eager to reunite with Mara, as he had truly missed her. Eric and Mara finally reunited, sharing tender moments under the moonlight, alleviating their longing by being affectionate with each other. Aware that Eric had returned, Otto and Gustav devised another plan to play a prank on him. This time, they opted to scatter dirt while Eric was asleep. Their tricks always seemed to succeed. Eric and Pierre awoke immediately and tidied up their room, which was now covered in dirt. However, Eric wasn't willing to just let it go. He was determined to get even with Otto and Gusta. Gathering the remaining dirt, he quietly entered Otto's room and spread it around while Otto was sound asleep. The following day during breakfast in the dining hall, Eric chose to create a commotion. He loudly asked all the students if they could detect a terrible smell. Then, he pretended to investigate the source of the odor by sniffing around, ultimately stopping in front of Otto, who was having his breakfast. Eric then announced to everyone that the unpleasant smell was emanating from Otto. This infuriated Otto because Eric was openly mocking him. Otto repeatedly punched Eric in the face, but Eric refrained from retaliating because he had promised his mom he wouldn't. Recognizing this, Mara quickly urged Otto to cease, as they couldn't bring Eric down. Otto and Gusta shifted their focus to Pierre, who was Eric's roommate and his sole friend at the school. Otto confronted Pierre in the dining hall, but Pierre declined, feeling he had no reason to answer to Otto's accusations. Otto, however, remained persistent and challenged Pierre to a fight after their last class, even resorting to threats if Pierre didn't comply. Otto and Gusta appeared to be intentionally targeting Pierre to provoke a reaction from Eric. Eric, unwilling to stand idly by as his best friend endured bullying from Otto and his group, decided to confront the situation. After dealing with Pierre, Otto and his crew seemed determined to target Eric next, to ensure no students dared to defy them. That evening, Pierre reluctantly accepted Otto's challenge and appeared at the fight location, though he stood alone while Otto and Gusta had their allies with them. Despite Pierre's best efforts, it was evident that he and Otto were not evenly matched. After only a few minor blows from Otto, Pierre found himself on the ground. Unfortunately, Eric was nowhere to be found at that crucial moment, even though his best friend was being mistreated by Otto and his gang. When Eric eventually arrived, it was too late to intervene in the ongoing fight. He helped Pierre back to their room and tended to his injuries. Afterward, he allowed Pierre to rest. Later that night, Eric crossed paths with Mara, and they spent the evening together. The following morning, Eric couldn't shake his concern for Pierre's well-being, prompting him to rush back to their room. To his surprise, the room was empty, and Pierre had already departed. It was clear from Pierre taking his belongings that he didn't plan to return to school. In his absence, Pierre had left a letter behind, expressing his apologies for his sudden departure. He praised Eric as a great friend and encouraged him not to give in to the unfairness perpetuated by Otto and his gang. Pierre urged Eric to continue the fight against the injustices that were all too common at the school. Determined, Eric decided to reveal his true character and resolved to seek revenge on Otto and his crew for how they had mistreated his friend and other students. He found Gustav in the dining hall and challenged them to a showdown in the arena, planning to confront them alone. Despite Gustav and von Schennen's intimidating size and strength, Eric realized that these two troublemakers were all talk and relied on their parents' influence. So, Eric faced them head-on, ready to stand up against the bullies who had caused so much harm at the school. Eric, who had a touch of rebellion in him, managed to defeat them effortlessly. After dealing with Gusta and von Schennen, he turned to a surprised Otto. Eric warned Otto that he was next on his list. However, before giving Otto a response, Eric headed to the school kitchen. There, a female staff member informed him that Mara had left the school due to being fired. She handed him a letter from Mara, and Eric was devastated by her abrupt departure, much like he had been when Pierre left. One of Otto's associates saw Eric receiving the letter from the female school employee and hurried to inform Otto. They burst into Eric's room, instructing their friends to search through Eric's belongings. Among the items they discovered was a letter from Mara. Otto read it and uncovered the secret relationship between Eric and Mara. Naturally, Otto used the letter as evidence to have Eric expelled from the school. He wasted no time in presenting the principal with this compelling proof of a significant rule violation. The principal swiftly called Eric and expelled him, without much consideration for the gravity of the Marja incident. Eric accepted his punishment with grace, but he pleaded with the principal to return Mara's letter, which was his only keepsake of her. However, the principal refused and locked the letter away in a drawer. Now that Eric had been expelled, he felt he had nothing left to lose and decided to seek revenge on Otto for all the hardships he had endured at Starburg. After all, he had already been kicked out of school, so there was no holding him back. Eric managed to track down Otto, who was walking alone in the woods. Confronting Otto, Eric used a stick to intimidate him, causing Otto to surprisingly kneel down and obey Eric's commands without hesitation. Otto was in a complete state of panic and even offered Eric $110,000 in desperation to spare his life. However, Eric turned down the offer. As he prepared to confront Otto further, Otto broke down in tears, begging for mercy and even becoming physically ill from fear. Eric, moved by Otto's extreme distress, held Otto's face and assured him that he wouldn't take his life. Because he didn't condone Otto's harsh treatment of weaker individuals, Eric returned to school to collect his belongings. He recalled Gunnar's advice to reach out if he faced any issues at school, prompting him to contact Gunnar. Before long, the lawyer arrived at Starburg. Eric confided in Gunnar about his situation, and together they approached the principal, who was conversing with the teachers. Eric implored not to be expelled from school and requested the return of Marja's letter. Initially, the principal was reluctant, but when Gunnar entered the room and hinted at exposing the case system and bullying among the students, as well as the principal's involvement, the principal had no choice but to concede to all of Eric's requests. The student council led by Otto was disbanded. In short, Eric was immensely grateful to Gunnar for allowing him to return to school and end Otto and his gang's control. He enjoyed peaceful days at school until his graduation day arrived. His mother was bursting with pride and joy over her son's achievements during his time at Starburg. However, his stepfather remained displeased as Eric continued to receive poor marks in his behavior evaluations at school. When his stepfather prepared to resort to violence, Eric stood up for himself and declared that there would be no more violence in their house. He removed his stepfather from their lives for good. Sometime later, Eric reunited with Pierre, who was headed to Geneva for further education. They vowed to meet again in the future.